Hey everyone, Ham here. It's been a while since I've done a tech video, and with the release of version 28 of the Oculus Air Link, I thought I would talk a little bit about PCVR and what options are now available. So up until recently, I've been using the link cable mostly for gameplay, and also been using virtual desktop to play games wirelessly on the Quest 2. And for the most part, virtual desktop is pretty good, but still when it comes to VR seated gameplay or gameplay where I'm close to the computer, then I tend to use the link cable just because the latency is better and the image quality is better, and the support for more games is available on the link, where with virtual desktop it's always been hit and miss. Anyway, this week we saw the launch of AirLink, and that's Oculus's own native supported version of virtual desktop, if you want to call it that. And what that means is, out of the box, it'll now work wirelessly as long as you've got a compatible wireless router and also a PC to play PCVR games on. So in this video, I thought I'd just do a recap of the options available for PCVR and what I think about AirLink now that I've given it a go this week, and what I think in terms of whether you should ditch the link cable and not even buy one if you haven't already, and is AirLink good enough to use 100% of the time. As well as that, in this video, I'll give you a few tips and tricks for if you're playing PCVR for the first time on your Quest 2 and how you can get the most out of it. And as well as that, I'll give you my final thoughts on what I tend to use going forward. Okay, first up, the requirements if you want to play PCVR on the Oculus Quest. This applies for both AirLink and for using the standard USB link cable. I'll leave a link to this page in the description below. Basically, it suggests a Intel i5 or Ryzen 5 1500X or better, 8GB of RAM plus. Personally, I'd go for something a bit stronger than this if you're getting a PC for VR. I'd be looking at a Intel i7 9700 or better and 16GB of RAM if I was starting. In terms of the GPU supported, there's a list here. These are quite low entry level GPUs, so again, if I was starting from scratch, I would go for at least a RTX 2070 or better, or if you can get your hands on one of the 3000 series, so a 360 or 370 or better. But if your budget permits, then I'd say the optimum GPU to go for PCVR would now be the 3080, but good luck getting one at the minute because they're all on eBay. So first up, I'll take a look at the standard Oculus Link cable method. So what you'll want to do is check that once the Quest is connected to your PC via either the official link cable or one of the other recommended USB cables, such as the Anchor cable, that once you do the speed test, it gives you the green tick. And as you can see here, I've got a nice 2.5 gigabits per second, and I'm connected via USB 3. Now, the actual documentation only mentions one USB port, so it does work with USB 2.0, but USB 3 is preferred, not just for the speed, but also for the fact that it can, in some cases, charge your headset as you're using it. So with the headset connected, I'll just show you some of the settings in Oculus if you've not used it before. So out of the box, we've got 3 different refresh rates. 72Hz, which is the standard one, which the Quest 1 originally had, 80Hz and also 90Hz. Now, we do know that the Quest 2 does support 120Hz, but currently that's only for standalone games at the moment. Hopefully sometime down the road, 120Hz will be available here to pick. So what you can do, you can pick a refresh rate according to your PC spec. Now, in my particular case, I'm actually running a RTX 3090, and I'm able to push this to the maximum resolution here. The reason I've got it on 72Hz and not 90 is that for some games, in particular Assetto Corsa Competizione, which is known for being a very difficult game to run in VR, I prefer to have it on a stable 72 rather than trying to achieve 90Hz and it drop back down to a lower refresh rate using Asynchronous Spacewarp, which is reprojection and is a motion smoothing technology. So one thing to look at once you've got your Quest set up is the graphic preferences, and you'll want to adjust this according to your PC setup. Now, by default, it'll be set to 72Hz, and this will be set to automatic recommended, and this is the default setting where if you just want to plug it in and you want it to work, then just leave it on this. But if you want to squeeze a bit more performance out of the headset and make the games look a bit sharper in the headset, then you'll want to try changing these settings and monitoring the performance according to your system. So previously, when I had a 1080 Ti, I found for the most part that I'd run it at 80 Hz, and then I'd have the rendering resolution turned up a little bit to about 1.1. And I found for most games on a 1080 Ti, this works pretty well across most games. Again, it'll depend on what games you're running, and in the game you have the option of increasing the render resolution further with super sampling, or turning it down by undersampling. But just keep that in mind if you want to get a better image or get the most out of your PC. So another application you'll probably become aware of whilst using the Quest 2 for PCVR is an application called the Oculus Debug Tool. Now this is actually located in the install when you install the Oculus app itself, and its location is usually C program files, Oculus support, Oculus diagnostics, and in here we've got Oculus Debug Tool. Also in this folder is Oculus Mirror. This is quite a handy tool if you want to display the gameplay to viewers, or if you're a content creator and you want to stream. You get a few more options to adjust the image that's displayed on the monitor that you may not necessarily get on the screen from the gameplay itself. So we'll talk about that in a moment, but for the minute I'm just going to talk about Oculus Debug Tool. So I'll just quickly run through some of the options on the Oculus Debug Tool. First up, we've got pixels per display override. This is just a fancy name for super sampling. What that means is it's a way of sharpening the image, often by rendering the image larger than what it actually is and then scaling it down. Most of the time I leave this on 0 because if I want to do any super sampling, then I'll do it in the game itself. So the next thing I'd like to talk about now is the FOV tangent multiplier. And this is really handy if you want to squeeze the maximum performance out of your gaming PC. And what this allows you to do is set the amount of field of view that you want to see in the headset. Now, with the Quest 2, I can find that if I squeeze the headset so it's really tight on my face, I can just about see the edges of the panel. But at a comfortable setting, I can't actually see the edges of the panel, in which case I can reduce this setting so not so much of the game is rendered on the panel, and that therefore means the GPU doesn't have to work as hard to render the game to your device, and therefore can mean a smoother or a sharper experience. So I've currently got this set to 0.9 and 0.9, which is essentially saying only render 90% horizontal and 90% of the vertical screen than normal. And I found this is a good way to squeeze a little bit more extra performance out of your GPU. Next one I'll jump to is the Asynchronous Spacewarp, which is basically motion smoothing, and this will kick in if your GPU can't render enough frames to meet the refresh rate that we saw earlier on the Oculus settings. So for the most part, I'll leave this on auto, but there are options here to force it to say 45, and that'll mean that it's not jumping in and out of ASDW, which can sometimes be off-putting when you're playing a game. When this kicks in, you'll notice it suddenly slow down a little bit. So it's up to you whether you leave this on or off. I've got mine set to auto. Distortion curvature. This basically dictates how sharp or not the image is in the center of the headset. Low counterintuitively means it's low distortion, so that's the better quality image. Encode resolution width is the width of the video image that's sent from your PC to the headset. Encode dynamic bitrate, this is a new property that was added in the Air Link update. So what I understand this will do, it'll adjust the bitrate according to the network latency. So for me, I've just got this off disabled. This will be a static bitrate based on what I've set here, and I've got mine set to 400 when I'm using the link cable. Now, one thing to note here, the Air Link maximum throughput is actually 200 megabits. So if you've got this any higher than 200, it causes some massive latency issues in the headset. So if you're having problems and you used Link before and it's fine, and you're having problems with Air Link, then I recommend that you set this back to 0. So one final setting I just want to tell you about is under Visible HUD. Now there's a few different options here, but the one I use most frequently for fine-tuning the graphics in different VR games is the performance HUD. So if you turn this on here, and we'll just fire up Oculus Mirror for a second, and what you'll get here is a bunch of information regarding latency, but the key one I tend to look at is the performance headroom, and I try to make sure this is in the region of at least 20 to 30% for most games, depending on how variable the graphics are. And this is just an important metric to be aware of, so that you can fine-tune games to get the optimal graphics without causing performance issues on your headset. So they're all the settings for the standard USB version of Oculus Link. If you want to use Air Link, make sure you've got the latest version of the Oculus software downloaded. Now, to enable Air Link, you'll want to go to the Beta tab under Settings, and then all you need to do is turn this on. Now, in its current form, because this is an experimental feature under the Beta tab, one annoying thing is that every time you want to use it on your PC, you just need to go into the Oculus settings and turn this on. For the moment, it keeps turning itself off, and I guess that's just to remind you that this is an experimental feature. So once you've got this connected and this is set to on, you're good to go back to the Quest 2 and turn on AirLink. So what you'll need to check first of all is that the Oculus Quest has had the version 28 update. So if you go to the About section of your settings, it should show you there. If this version is available, then all you need to do is go to Experimental Features and go to AirLink and just turn the slider on. Now, if you don't see this, and quite a few people don't the first time it's installed, just all you need to do is hit Reset All to Default on Reset Experimental Features, wait for the Quest to reboot, and then when it's finished the reboot, it should then be available. One annoying thing I've had with my Quest is this toggle button doesn't always want to stay put, and it seems to, initially I couldn't get it to set on until I actually rebooted the Quest, and similarly I've not been able to turn it off sometimes. So just keep that in mind if you're switching between the wired Link and AirLink. This might be a little bit irritating. So that's it. As you see, it's just gone back on now. Look, I'll turn it off, scroll down, scroll up, it's back on again. So assuming you've got the software running on your desktop PC, it should say Oculus Air Link and give the name of your PC here. So we'll click connect there, launch it. There we go. So by clicking the little Oculus Air Link symbol on the far left, you can get into the bitrate settings here. So I found so far FPS games 50 megabits a second on dynamic works well for me, but you'll have to play around with this according to your current setup. Some people have had more success using the fixed bitrate, but I found the dynamic one seems to work quite nicely. One thing to note, the more you lower this, the better the latency will be, so it's a trade-off between good image quality and performance. So we've now got AirLink set up, and I'm showing you the view through SideQuest. So let's use the combat trial area as a good test bench. I'll say this is pretty good. It feels smoother. What virtual desktop did. Another good feature with the Oculus implementation is you can add a desktop panel. So if you're a streamer, you can just go to a window, bring it in, and then you can just pin it. And if we turn back to our VR game, our chat's here, and carry on playing, something you couldn't do with virtual desktop. So one other application I want to mention is this great little tool called Oculus Tray Tool. And I'll put a link for this in the description below, but what it essentially lets you do is profile your different games and set up different settings according to the game. So if you come here, download the latest one, and I'll just bring it up now so you can see what it looks like. With the Oculus Tray Tool open, you'll notice some of the settings here are very similar, if not the same, to the Oculus Debug Tool settings. So if we look at the Oculus Mirror FOV multiplier here, This is actually the FOV tangent multiplier over here. So one good thing with Oculus Tray Tool is the settings that you save here, when you restart your PC and then you load up Tray Tool, it'll remember the settings that you saved. With Oculus Debug Tool, some of these settings don't always save, such as the FOV multiplier, so having this installed actually makes it handy for saving settings such as that. So one of the main selling points of the Oculus Tray Tool is this option here for profiles, and what this allows you to do is set up a different profile for each game. So currently I've just got one set up for Assetto Corsa Competizione, and what you can actually do here is, if we go into edit by double clicking, we can see some of the properties here. So again, you can set the super sampling on a per game basis, asynchronous Spacewarp mode, you can alter that again on a game basis. You can set the CPU priority. So when ACC runs, I want CPU priority to be set high for this game. You can set whether you want Oculus Mirror to start straight away, and a bunch of other good stuff here. Now, if you're having performance issues with your Quest, then this option here is actually quite a handy setting to have available, and this is the OVR server priority. If you do a quick Google on this, you'll see a lot of people that have had performance issues in the past have found that going into Task Manager and setting this to high removes quite a lot of stutters. So the good thing of this is, if you set this to high and you save it, this will always set OVR server priority to high and you're good to go. And finally, there's an Oculus Quest link here, which again gives us some of the same properties that we've got on the Oculus Debug Tool. So you can set here and it's going to remember it for next time. So if we hit the little drop down, there's some default settings here. And there's actually been some presets already picked here depending on your GPU. So if we look at 1070, as we go down the list of higher performing GPUs, the encode resolution goes up and the distortion curvature should go down to low. Okay, so last of all, I'll show you Oculus Mirror. So you see I've got it loaded up here. So this shows you exactly what I'm seeing in the headset. So this is handy if you're streaming. You can just hit F2, go full screen. And under settings, we've got a whole load of options here. So the FOV scale actually refers to these settings here. So if we change this and set them lower, they will be reflected over here and vice versa. So if we go down to 120%, there we go. So we've got different options here, like you can choose which eye you want to display to the viewer. This is quite handy if you're playing a first-person shooter game. If you're left eye dominant, you can switch to a different eye. Another real cool feature in here is the image stabilization. So we can turn that on. If I physically move the headset around, like you can see I'm doing here, it keeps the screen stable. So overall, what do I think of the three different options? So first of all, I'm really impressed with AirLink, what I've used so far. The user experience is definitely a step up from Virtual Desktop, at least for me. When I play tested it with Population 1, it did seem to play a little bit smoother than using Virtual Desktop. I was also able to turn up the graphics higher than what I was able to using Virtual Desktop, and it did look a bit better with less artifacting and a smoother experience overall. The other handy thing with using AirLink over Virtual Desktop is the fact that if you're a content creator, you can now pop out the window and view your chat. So now that we've got AirLink, does that mean we can just get rid of our link cables? I'd say not, particularly depending on the kind of game that you're playing. So if you're playing a sim racing game where you're sat down and you're near to your computer, then to get the best visual experience with the lowest latency, then I'd say using the cable is still the way to go. And you also get the added bonus of it being charged or keeping it charged, depending on whether you're using a 2.0 or USB 3.0 connection. With AirLink, I think the best use case for it is if you're playing a first-person shooter or something where you're stood up playing standing VR. Just keep in mind you'll need to be quite close to your router, and it needs to be a fairly new AC or AX router. So I'll leave a link in the description below of the TP-Link Archer C6 that I'm currently using, and that's available at a bargain price of £40 at the minute, and I highly recommend that particular router. Now, I have tried the slightly newer version, which is the Wi-Fi 6 version of that router, and there wasn't much performance difference in it at all. If anything, my older router seemed to perform slightly better and was reporting a lower latency using virtual desktop than using the Wi-Fi 6 one. So I definitely recommend that particular one if you're in the market for buying one. Also keep in mind, if you're going to get one of these wireless routers, you'll want it wired to your gaming PC and as close to your play area as possible. So there you go. Hope you found this video useful. Don't forget, if you liked it, hit the thumbs up, leave a comment below, and if you want to be kept up to date with more VR content, hit that subscribe button. Alright, until next time, bye bye.